Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're zooming in from. Thank you for joining us on this really important and critically vital topic for anybody in the global tribe, since so many of you are executives. But one thing that keeps coming up is, how can I be more effective with my extended team, whether it's across a country or especially if it's across the world? So this is a program, it's entitled Enhancing Global Team Performance, that actually came to me in a dream. So the first part of it was Kyle Hegarty, based out of Singapore. He's the author of the book, The Accidental Business Nomad, a survival guide for working across a shrinking planet. And that was stuck in my head. And then he sent me an email and it's like, wow, what a great topic. And if we could just pull a couple more folks into it, we'll get a different perspectives on such an important thing. So I'm really excited. I've been just like waiting for this all day. It's in the afternoon here in the Americas and morning in Asia, Kyle being in Singapore. So we really appreciate you, Kyle, sharing early morning, 7 a.m. in Singapore. And we'll kick off with you. By the way, I'm Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, and I get excited about this kind of stuff. So I'm sorry, but I think many of the rest of you do as well, because we all can relate to being more effective, being more productive, being a better leader. And there's no better three people that we can listen to today for this discussion. We're going to have each of them give some content. Then we'll have about 30 minutes for Q&A. And so dial in your questions into the Zoom area here, or send them to info@globalchamber.org and we'll cover them. So Kyle, hey, thank you so much for joining us today. You're the Managing Director and Leadership Nomad division of TSL. And so, kick us off and take us in the right direction to begin with.
Well, thank you so much, Doug, and thanks for the invite here. Quick question. I think I'm able to share screens. Is that correct? Can I, let's test this one, see if this works. Boom. Can everybody see my, there we go. So there's a quick little pitch on the book cover here. It's the best way to judge a book, by its cover. But yeah, so I have this book that came out in the US, and it gets published in the rest of the world next week on the 27th of August. And essentially what I'm arguing is that companies and organizations have gone global, but people have not. And what happens when organizations rush into new markets, or when people have to rush into new markets? I write about those stories and what individuals have gone through. The reason I did it was because I've been an expat for about 15 years, and I keep seeing the same mistakes made over and over and over again. So I tried to put some fun examples into this and then talk about what we can do about it. Because the big thing that I keep seeing is that culture gets in the way, communication styles, and some of this invisible stuff. And I want to talk a little bit about that just for a few minutes, and then we'll turn it over to the rest of this great panel. Maybe I'll start out by just talking about foreign managers, and this can be people who come in actually before, when we were able to fly around, or virtually. So people who inherit a team who might be dispersed in different parts of the world, or if they're expanding into a new part of the world and take on a new hire or a new partner. We've started referring to these situations, these people, these foreign managers, as seagulls. And so I want to talk about seagulls for a couple of minutes, because seagulls are big, goofy, oftentimes white birds that fly in from seemingly out of nowhere. They land, they squawk around, they crap all over the place, they make a mess, and then they just fly away and disappear. And I talk about this to companies that have foreign presence, and it always gets a lot of laughter and heads nodding right away, because every company who has offices in different parts of the world or works globally can relate to this concept of a foreign manager coming in, making all this noise, and then just disappearing. And so we've tended to kind of lightheartedly refer to them as seagulls. I am certainly guilty of being a seagull in the past, causing all sorts of issues. And I thought I'd just give a quick example of that. There are infinite amounts of them, and they're growing by the day. Friend of mine, and I will say friend of mine, he is a friend of mine. He did this, and I did the exact same thing. Inherited a team years ago across Southeast Asia. And my intro to them, I introduced myself, and I basically said, listen, you all understand your individual markets better than I do. I need you to tell me how I can help you. I need us to all work together. In fact, I need you to think of it that I'm working for you. Let me know how I can help you. And I said something like this to a team years ago, and an Australian friend of mine did the exact same thing to his team. And it's a very bad idea, or in both of our cases, it fell completely flat. What I think that would have worked where I'm from, North America, Boston, US, and where he's from, Australia, it had very different interpretations across Southeast Asia. What I thought I was saying was, we're all in this together. Let's work as a team. I have an open door policy. Come and work with me anytime. What my team heard was, I am from a different part of the world. I have no idea what's going on, and I need somebody to tell me what to do. And I'm the last person who should be in charge here. And I worked with my friend for about 6 months to try and repair that little speech that he made. And I would say he got there, but it probably took 6 to 12 months to fix that. And that's just one very small example about how a couple of sentences can end up putting you in the wrong direction without having any idea. Your intentions could be entirely positive, but how you communicate that and how it's received is something that's entirely different. And so I now spend a lot of time trying to help show other people to what these things are happening and how they can hopefully avoid them. The way I do it is a couple of things. And in the book, I get into I'm looking at characters, I'm looking at individuals. There was a couple people who I think have cracked this code or figured it out. One of them introduced me to data. There's all this cross-cultural data that's been done in the last few decades, and it's looking at communication styles and those variances around the world. It's looking at how leadership varies, right? How you manage teams, how you handle clients, how you even build relationships, how you incentivize people and motivate them. These to me are like things we all get trained on as we're growing up and developing professionally. But then it turns out in different parts of the world, they can be interpreted very differently. So the people that end up evolving and learning how to adapt to this are the ones that I think are the best in terms of like global leadership, which is my focus area. It's tough though, because this stuff is kind of like invisible. It's hard to get your head around. But what I love about this research is that it's out there. And if you can start measuring these differences across the part of the world, different parts of the world, you can start to manage it. And so I thought I'd just show very quickly and then hand it over to the rest of the team, a couple of examples of some of this data and how it gets visualized. There's a professor out of INSEAD, I think she's still at INSEAD, Erin Meyer, and what she's taken is she's taken a bunch of research that's been done. She's added a little bit of her own, and she's created these cool visualizations. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this, but what you're looking at line by line would be the top part here is communication styles. I'm from the US. I think most of us, we've got a lot of Americans here. We tend to be direct communicators. We say pretty much what we're thinking. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not a good thing. And we just tell it like it is, versus other parts of the world that would be much more indirect in their style of communication, where it might even be perceived to be rude to say the word no directly. It might be much more correct or normalized to kind of talk around a subject to avoid seeming too confrontational. There is ways people give feedback, which is a critical component to managing any team. That's that second line. There's how teams are led, how decisions get made. And again, I'm throwing like a lot of data here in 5 minutes, so don't worry about the details here, but just to get a sense of these different dimensions that are being measured and studied in different parts of the world. Task-based versus relationship-based building. This stuff is critical in terms of expanding teams or building relationships in different parts of the world. How we handle conflict and scheduling. Are we on time or are we not on time? Some of my biggest clients have been in Germany and Switzerland, and you start on time and you apologize for starting right on time because you probably should have started earlier, versus my multiple experiences up in India, which, if we're starting within that hour, you get that nice hour window to be on time. So it's measured in different ways. Here's just very quickly, though, how you could look at the United States across this spectrum. Here's where the US data suggests at a macro level how Americans do business. So these would be the American working style. And I won't get into it, but we zig and zag, and quite frankly, Americans, compared to the rest of the world, are very confusing. And this zigging and zagging is part of that explanation. I would love to do another section or session just on how Americans are so confusing to the rest of the world. But the first part of that is that we're very direct communicators, but look what happens. We start hedging when we give feedback. And whatever happened to us being direct? Well, all of a sudden we're starting to become a little bit more indirect when we're giving feedback. So it gets confusing. But let me just throw into context here, Thailand, one of my nearby neighbors, how visually different they come out on these dimensions. And I thought I would just throw out a couple of other countries. Here's the big guys, China. So you're looking at Malaysia, I think through India in here somewhere. India, China, all of these countries, this represents a majority of the population of the planet. And oftentimes, myself, a lot of Westerners, for example, we learn management styles, leadership styles where we're from. And we apply those styles when we go abroad. And I love this as a visual starting point because it shows how different some of these working styles can be. And what I recommend people do is they start with the data, and you can, if you've got the relationship with your team, pull these maps, or I can pull these maps for you, or somebody can pull these maps for you to customize them. You can pull this for, 85 countries, and see what's out there. What are these differences looking like? What are the similarities looking like? If you can start defining what these gaps are, you can start coming up with plans to measure it. I work with companies to do this as well, and I try to just introduce these concepts in the book. And so that's what I wanted to show you here today. I think I've got so many of these slides. Here's Singapore, where I'm based here, but you can still clearly see what I like to think about, this East-West divide, because so many companies from the West are still expanding into growth markets where I am across Southeast Asia. I think in the post-COVID times, I think this is going to increase because Southeast Asia is we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. My kids are heading off to school as we speak. So I think that these growth markets are going to start growing pretty fast. And I think there's going to be a lot more focus on how to get involved or take advantage of some of this growth. And these are the problems that happen every single time if you are new to expanding globally. So that's my quick introduction and talk here. I know that the other panelists have some pretty cool perspectives and different angles as well. So I think I'll hand over my time now, Doug, back to you, and happy to take questions throughout or turn this into a discussion later today.
Great. That sounds really good, Kyle. You are an American, right?
I am an American, born in Boston.
Okay. Right. So when you're when you're interacting with Singaporeans who, because I've lived there as well, and my own experiences, they tend to be pretty aggressive and competitive with each other, very different from Japanese. So where do you find the kind of similarities and main differences with the local crowd there?
You know, it's interesting there, and there's a current controversy and challenge right now where the government is going after foreign companies because they're not hiring, or if they think that they're not hiring enough locals or promoting enough locals. And so they are putting punishments in place. They're saying you have to, if you don't hire more locals, we're not going to let you bring in more foreign talent. And one of the big challenges that's happened here is foreign companies come in, they hire locals, and then there's these weird misunderstandings and these gaps. And the gaps are very often in working styles. So in Singapore, for example, how relationships get built, excuse me, this is a weird example, but in Singapore, you go and you take an hour lunch, and that's where you get to know your colleagues. That's where you build relationships. And I work with a lot of US and British and Australian companies. Their way of building relationships is, hey, let's cut out early and go to the pub. And so you get this pub culture and you get this lunch culture. And if the two of those different cultures aren't willing to have a little bit of compromise and overlap, nothing ever, you end up with this us versus them problem. And it sounds so simple, but my advice to foreigners is get used to having long lunches and stop trying to bring people to the pub if they don't want to go to the pub. So it's a pretty good starting point just to get a little bit more interaction between these two different working styles.
Very cool. Go have some black chicken soup at a hawker stand and build some
chicken rice. That's right.
So thank you. So we're going to go to our next speaker. It's Monique Daigneault. She's the executive coach at MD Consulting. It's her own firm. She's the founder. And one of the really cool things about Monique is she works with leaders around the world, and she helps them build their soft skills. And she works both one-on-one, and she works, beyond that. So Monique, it looks like I might have frozen, at least on my end, so hopefully you can hear me. And why don't you take it away as the next speaker?
Sure, thanks, Doug. And hello to our viewers and our listeners out there. This topic is a really great topic, so I'm happy to be involved in this panel. As I was thinking through the topic, enhancing the performance of global teams, what could be impacting the performance of global teams? I thought back to what my clients are bringing to the coaching sessions. What am I hearing a lot about regarding their teams and their challenges, their struggles? One topic that keeps coming up across the board is a lack of work-life balance. That seems to be impacting teams across borders. And especially now with the state of the affairs and everyone working from home. So I'd like to say a few things about that today. There are many components under that umbrella of work-life balance, but there are three main components that my clients keep talking about in our sessions: boundaries, ergonomics, and lack of movement. So I want to say a little bit about each of those and maybe pose a couple of suggestions, some possible solutions for leaders who are having this challenge with their teams. Let's start with boundaries. And when I say boundaries, I'm really referring to time boundaries. There's a lack of time boundaries now that everyone's working from home. And here's what's happening. Oh, someone on a team who is working from home rolls out of bed about 6 o'clock in the morning, starts checking emails, sees that a lot of emails appeared during the night, and many of those emails from their manager. So they start responding. They sit down at their dining room table, which is now their workspace, and they start responding to emails, and that might go on for 3 or 4 hours. Oh, and then they have a few meetings that they have to go to. Now it's lunchtime, they haven't eaten. Some of them may not have gotten dressed yet. And this goes on until sometimes 9 and 10 o'clock at night. So there's no start time or no stop time anymore to work. Now, if you were in the office, that would not happen. At least you would get dressed. But in this case, the emails are pouring in. There's back-to-back meetings now because you don't have the drive-by conversations that you have in the office when you can just stop by somebody's desk. So as a leader, if you're a leader of a team, you actually need to be modeling appropriate boundary behavior, meaning try to keep your emails and send them at a reasonable time. Because if you're sending them in the middle of the night or late at night or say before 6 a.m., you're sending the message that you want someone to read that email right then and there and respond to it. So your people are going to think that they need to be checking emails late into the night and first thing in the morning. So try to model that behavior first of all. And maybe during these times of COVID-19, you may have to lower your expectations a little bit because people now have children at home and there are distractions. And even though it will be temporary, this is the way life is right now at the moment. So there has to be some expectations set around time, start and stop time, and expectations about when emails should be answered. If you want them answered immediately, maybe that's just for something that's labeled urgent, but it doesn't have to mean every email needs to be answered urgently. So a leader has to really be more mindful about their own behavior and then express to the team what this new normal means, what these new expectations mean. Ergonomics, let's talk about that for a minute. As I mentioned, people are working in spaces that are not normal for them. Their dining room table, their bed, working by leaning up against their headboard of their bed with their computer in their lap. There's a lot of workspaces that are not set up to be workspaces. So the lighting isn't right, the seating isn't right. So now we have people really suffering with back pain, neck pain, headaches. So if a company can afford it, and some have been able to, ask your team what they need and try to help provide that for them if you have a budget for this. And that could mean a better chair to sit in. It could mean a desk. It could mean better lighting, even something as simple as a room divider to block out visual distractions. It's really important that people be working in a place that their body is comfortable in, because if not, it will definitely impact productivity. Lack of movement. This is coming up almost daily in almost every single coaching session that I have. So now people are sitting from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. They're not walking around the office. They're not getting up to make photocopies. They're not walking into a conference room to a meeting. They're sitting all day long and they're sitting in these uncomfortable workspaces. So when you're not moving, you're not productive because your mind is not going to work the way it should. You're not going to be focused. So it's really important to get up and walk around. If you can get a little bit of sunlight during the day, that helps even more. If people can design some brief home workouts, something to get the blood flowing and take breaks for meals. Now, as a leader, if you have a team working from home, you need to ask about these things. There's a lot of assumptions being made. So leaders really need to show empathy for their teams by asking these kinds of questions, asking about their work-life balance, asking if they are feeling healthy, where their workspace is located, is there anything that can be done? And really there may be some solutions that are impossible right now, but leaders need to at least take that first step to ask. and even brainstorm with their team about, what is this new normal looking like for us? What are our new best practices? And let the team come up with some solutions. Because if there is a better work-life balance, it will dramatically improve the performance of global teams. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Monique. In terms of the folks that you're working with, are they, for the most part, maintaining the business going forward? Are they growing rapidly? Are they shrinking rapidly? What does the distribution of your clients look like?
Between March and June, business had slowed down quite a bit. And I work across 30 different industries. And that was pretty much the case. I mean, there were a few industries that were growing. So IT, banking, finance, those industries were booming. But for the most part, other businesses really slowed down. Now, since June, I would say between June and July, there was more of an even keel as people were getting used to this new normal. And now just through August, I've noticed that some businesses are actually picking up. People are getting promoted because promotions were put on hold in a lot of these organizations. So now there are people getting promoted. I think some businesses are feeling just a little more comfortable. They're willing to loosen up the purse strings a little bit. They're not so tight on the budget. They've had a chance to do some planning. And when COVID-19 first hit, there was nothing anyone could plan for. So people automatically stopped spending. And we did this in our personal lives, and it happened in businesses also. But now they're starting to plan ahead. They're coming up with contingency plans. And so the spending is increasing a little bit, which is helping the employees internally. They're relaxing a little more. If promotions were put on hold, some of them now are coming through. Others have been told that probably by year end, they may see their promotion.
Okay, great. That'll help for sure. Thank you much. Thank you so much for sharing. Keep the questions coming in, folks. We've got several of them. We're now going to move to our last speaker, and that's Gary Covert. He's the founder of Gary Covert Consulting. Gary is an amazing coach and leadership guru. He works with individual leaders, and what sets him apart is that he does some really good work with teams. He also does a lot of work in one of my favorite countries, Japan. And so Gary, let us know more about some of the things that we should be thinking about regarding this topic.
Sure, absolutely. So like Kyle, I'm going to share just a couple slides here. I won't overdo it, but just a couple things. There we go. Okay. So we're talking about creating high-performing global teams. I think what really happens here is the fact that global just adds some complexity, and the global nuances really raise the intensity. There's a lot more opportunity. It's why people go global. There are new markets. There are new products you might sell. There's new talent you might tap into. But the complexity sometimes gets in the way of the opportunity. And there's some interferences that come into play here. So the small nuances, as Kyle and Monique were talking about, can trip us up. And I want to talk about a couple of the barriers that I see and give some suggestions on what you might do about them. So in addition to some of the barriers that Kyle talked about in terms of the cultural values that he mapped out for us, there's language, there's work style, there's all these things, and they're exacerbated by some of the just what typically happens within the global environment. So global environment can mean different things for different companies. It might mean that they're predominantly a US company or Singaporean-based company, and they've got salespeople abroad, or they're much more integrated. They're a large company and they have big organizations, including manufacturing operations, also implanted in those locations. But the constant really can be that you have within those groups a lot of turnover and a lot of movement. And when you have turnover and movement, people changing jobs or moving into different departments, you see this particularly in Japan, where they have a culture of what they want to do is have the leaders gain experience by going from quality to sales, even more than the US, not just, hey, get some experience in a market or a different product line. They move them into whole different groups. So that's pretty extreme with Japan's point of view. But you also see that, somebody might get a stint working abroad, maybe 3 or 5 years, or they're on a product and move to different products. There's a big turnover and a lot of movement. So I think it's really important that people recognize the impermanence of these teams and have a lot of good systems and education and processes that account for it. The other barrier that I see is the fact that you have a bigger footprint. By definition, you're going to have more silos and more turf. You got more real estate around the world. You just got more ways for humans being humans, to kind of divide things up, saying, this is mine, that's not yours, that's my space, you can stay over there, things like that. And I think that can create some issues. You might say, well, this is just the way that the European market does it, or Latin American does it, or this is my product line, but within a particular international route or international area. So you got that going. So you got turnover, you got silos, and then you also have a barrier of people feeling disconnected from what I call the mothership. So if you have someplace that's, wherever the headquarters are, and they feel that they're removed from that, maybe you've got headquarters in the United States, but you have somebody working in Sao Paulo. They may feel, by definition of the fact that they're just not in the home country of the headquarters, that they feel some distance. And that can be a big interference when you're trying to make a global team. So feeling disconnected. The other one would be lack of networks. So Kyle was talking about, you have the lunch network and you have the evening pub network. Those are great ways to put those networks together. You could even say, hey, let's have a British tea network. Maybe you can get them to meet in the middle. But so you can, but one of the big issues that often occurs is people don't have a connection with other people. And as we all know as business professionals, it's not the system that you see in an organization chart that gets things done. It's who do you know? Who can I go talk to about resources? How can I get my idea socialized to get it accepted? In Japan, they call that nemawashi, kind of making, preparing the roots is what they call it, but getting things started. But they don't have these networks. So these are real barriers I think we need to have, that we also need to be cognizant of if we're going to be very savvy about this and have some strategies in place to take care of them. So those are some others that I would offer. And then I would also offer this, a couple ways, a couple suggestions here. So really, for an organization to be incredibly effective, they have to be doing three things very well. First is have an incredibly good strategy. So strategy is how we're going to win today. You have to have great talent. That's the team by which you're going to win. And then you have to be great at innovation, which is how we're going to win again. And in the context of global, strategy is really important because you want to make sure that you've got people involved in it. Like I said, the feeling of being disconnected is real. And if people feel that, one, the strategy didn't involve them, or they were a footnote, or they perceive that they were a footnote in the strategy, that will be an issue. Or if they feel that it doesn't reflect realities on the ground, they're going to discount it out of hand. So when you're working on your strategy, and you should be, make sure that people are involved to the degree that you can. It might be the global business unit leader in a particular location. It might be even just getting feedback prior to setting the strategy, and things like that. So You want to involve them in the process. You also want to make sure it's very well communicated. Prior to COVID and the clampdown on global travel, a lot of the senior leaders that I worked with, they spent, the most successful ones were spending 30 or 40% of their time, let's say if they're based in the US, going to their foreign locations, making sure that they're doing good town halls and keeping people apprised of what's going on. That's often very valued because they feel like, they're the, I'll use a US expression, the redheaded stepchild. They're feeling like they're not really part of the family. So making sure that those efforts are well communicated, that strategy is well communicated, I think would be very beneficial to your global team. Moving on to talent, if you're going to have an excellent team, an excellent global team, I think you have to really have people that enjoy that kind of environment. So in the papers recently, Wall Street Journal, just this week, they were talking, there was an article and it was talking about how HR people are trying to scratch their head to figure out how to keep people engaged these days, because people are starting to get a little bit bored. And so, they had the happy hours and they had the pajama parties via Zoom and show your dog at work and all these kinds of fun things. And the last article was, one company bought their organization a bunch of ukuleles, little guitars. Hey, we're going to learn how to play ukuleles together. So that's going to create team dynamics. And it doesn't. That's ephemeral. It doesn't last long. What you really want is enjoyment. You can keep people engaged if they really like it. So you're going to want to look for people that like the stimulation of working in a global environment. They're going to like or can at least tolerate ambiguity. They're going to be direct communicators who can also be tactful, so they can be on both ends of the spectrum that Kyle was talking about. So you got to look for people, and maybe, and as Monique was talking about, be able to kind of work and be okay with the work-life balance, because the great benefit of working in the US and working global is because you can work with Europe in the evening, your US colleagues at night, and then during the day, and then with Asia in the evening. But that sucks up a big part of the day. So you've got to kind of enjoy that and be willing to have those long days and be able to work with a little information. You probably want people that don't always have to be right, that can deal with some consensus, and operate through that point of view, not just what's always right, but what we can all live with. So you want to look for enjoyment factors. And then certainly you want to have people that have good cultural intelligence. There's all sorts of ways you can get at that, but just like you have emotional intelligence, and that's well developed, you want to work with people that have good cultural intelligence, or help them to develop, which is actually something you can do, develop their cultural intelligence. And then, and Kyle touched on this earlier, you can't have any managers who are going to be limiting factors. I call them lim facts. I picked that up from back in the days when I would do road biking. So when you're road biking, you've maybe got 20 or 30 bicycles riding together. And to be polite, you don't leave the slowest biker behind. But they do call that person the lim fact, the limiting factor, because it limits how fast the entire peloton can go, and you don't want to be that. So you want to make sure that you've got key managers who are great people developers, who have the savvy and understanding of cultural values, that can drive complex organizations, and make sure, because that's really a critical feature, because they're the glue that's going to marry your local endeavors with your corporate endeavors. And then lastly, you've got innovation. So I think one of the key things that's going on with the work from home experiment that we're all experiencing is that for the most part, it seems to be doing okay, in the sense that for the last several months, no big things have fallen off the bus. The wheels are still on the bus. But I'm worried, and many other leaders I'm talking to are worried about new people as they get integrated, being able to do new things. Existing people on existing processes, probably okay, but as you get new teams forming and new churn and new initiatives, that may be difficult. So I think it's really important to make sure that you've got processes in place for innovation. People have a real solid understanding about it, that you involve them. Actually, I think that this is a real key way that you can get teams developed, is get them on a common purpose and be able to cut through some of the issues. If you can get them working for a common purpose, sometimes the differences will fall away for the outcome. And then lastly, I would say, try digital first. And the reason is because you want to make sure you've got records and efficiencies built in. So when people move, and they will, the initiatives and the energy that were put into starting something, whether there's a new sales process or looking into a new market or developing new products, doesn't get lost. So making sure all that is well documented and doesn't just rely on what's in between the ears of a person who might move in 3 or 5 years. So those are my thoughts on that.
Great, thank you, Gary. Really appreciate it. Great start, all three of you. We have some questions, and I encourage you to continue to ask questions as an audience member. One of our last events that we did, we actually had 10 leftover questions, and we ended up answering them afterwards. And it was fascinating what the speakers, how they replied to those 10 questions that we couldn't cover in the 1 hour. So let's start. First, I'd like to mention a comment in the question area from Indira, who talked about 17 years ago moving from Mexico to the U.S. And when I read that, what occurred to me is, even Americans who have been like in the U.S. for 40, 50, 60 years, they have to keep up on the evolving changes. Imagine what it's like for someone from a foreign country to come in. And so after 17 years, Indira is doing an amazing job and continue to do an amazing job on both sides of the border. And I know when I came back to the U.S. on my expat assignments, I had to relearn the American way, and I'm still learning. So thank you for sharing that, Indira. Great story. Another question from Manuel. We've got kind of a two-parter, and this relates to the zigzagging, Kyle, that you talked about. Is the zigzagging a result of a higher level of diversity within the U.S.? Is that why you're seeing that within the American side of it? And then the other part of that question is, when you see the departure from your style to a local style, what do you do about it? Do you adjust and to their style, or do you change yourself, or do you make them understand your different style? What's the action item related to how to be a good leader when you recognize that your own personal style is different from one or more of the people that you're leading?
So those are two very distinct but important questions. The zigging and zagging imagery of the United States behaviors, working styles, I'm not sure that they have a 100% fact-based answer here, but I know that everyone's trying to kind of always figure this out. The direct communication style, it is hypothesized, originated because of the mass diversity and the fact that it is a nation of immigrants. How do you communicate with people from all different parts of the world? It's got to be as simple and straightforward and direct as possible. And that's how you ended up with that extreme direct approach. I think the culture of the country is also very much work focused. That's why you have a very strong task-based approach versus other parts of the world that are a little bit more relationship based. You can go, and I think there's anthropologists and sociologists that are looking at each of those things to try and come up with a narrative or data that would explain the zigging and zagging. That's my very long-winded way of saying, yeah, I think that the diversity is a big factor to that. And I know that both Gary and Monique are involved in this topic. So if they have any thoughts on some of these data sets, happy to hear from their side as well. The second question was, remind me, the second question was?
When you know that there's a gap between you and your team members, what do you do about it? What's the practical next step?
Yeah, the first big piece here is if you are acknowledging that gap, you are probably better than 50% of the people who are managing teams globally. I think it was both Gary, maybe Monique had used the phrasing as well, which is, you know, if you think that you have to be right all the time, you are going to have a very big problem managing people in different parts of the world. There are a number of ways to get from point A to point B. And I'm always, when I'm coaching people and looking and analyzing teams, if you get a lot of people in these teams that think that they have to be right all the time, or that they go, this is the way we do things here, you know, this is an American company, we do things the American way, and the rest of the world will be lucky when they learn about our processes. That's a very big flag. And that happens quite frequently at an individual and company level, and probably country level. And so you have to be very careful with that, because the historical trends show that it just doesn't work that way. So what do you have to do? Step one, exactly what you said, which is be aware of that. I'm a visual thinker, so I visually think about, okay, I've just walked into a scenario where I've got this gap. I recommend people do nothing. In other words, they pause, because my instinct is immediately to respond and to try and kind of talk my way through it. That's not always the best way to do it. So the first step is actually an easy one, but it's hard to do. Do nothing. Think about these data, these different components that we've been talking about, and then think if there are different ways that you can adjust. Now, there's short-term ways to do it, but there's also long-term ways to do it within a team. So I like to get teams to come together and actually talk through some of these scenarios, so that when the next time a scenario comes through, they have more of a background and context. So, you know, could we talk about a time when there was a disagreement within the team, or where there was one of these possible cultural misunderstandings? Can we define it, and can we talk about what we would do next time that pops up? And I was thinking about Monique's talks about, you know, how to start setting the rules of engagement, especially in a virtual team, whether that means that you don't respond to emails within set times. Whatever those rules are, I would say try and define those across the team up front. If we find that we're having one of these, I have a person I work with in the Philippines, and we have this thing where we go, you know what, I think we just had one of those culture moments. And when he stops the conversation and says that, I know that we're in a really good place, because we have been able to define some of these misunderstandings before they turn into problems. That's kind of how I'd start thinking about that.
Wow. Yeah, great. The transparency and being able to understand what's actually happening, take yourself out. Yeah. Gary or Monique, do you have some comments about that? And I'll add a third layer of this question is, how do you get feedback? You know, Gary talked about nemawashi, and in Japan, you'll go out after work for, you know, several 2 or 3 places, and you'll kind of hear the honest opinions after the second or third place, but we don't have the capability to do that. So how do you reach the level of transparency and honesty that Kyle just talked about, right? Where you're both like in the moment and you say, gee, this isn't working, or there's something broken here, let's address it.
I'd like to say something on that point. I think it's really important to show a natural, authentic curiosity. And that if you get to one of those moments, ask a question, ask an open-ended question about it, and just put it out there. Otherwise, it's like the elephant in the room, and everyone's trying to dance around it. So I have found that people are very receptive to someone who's curious and really transparent, and then that sparks additional conversation and additional learning moments. Great point. Gary, what do you think of that?
Point. So I wrote down Kyle's the do nothing and pause. I think that's excellent advice. And the curiosity. I think that's from an earlier point I was making. When you're looking at who do you want on your team, you probably do want curiosity. And I think that people who are willing to be curious in the moment and will pause. I think what occurs to me from this conversation is that you have the global cultures, you've got the national cultures, but cultures can get very granular, as small as 2, right? It's how do we do things around here? So you can start with some of the differences, but if you talk about some of the processes or some of these little hints that Monique and Kyle brought up, being curious, doing nothing, I think you can help evolve so that you can make a culture within your own team or within your own workmates and colleagues that would be incredibly effective. And I think it really highlights the fact that you want people that are willing to grow. So I call this the acorn principle. The acorn principle means that great big oak trees came from an acorn, but it had to change to grow. It looks nothing like a tree. We have to change to grow. Otherwise, we would have 500-pound acorns lying all over the world instead of great big beautiful trees. So as we go through this, and that's what I love about work and global work, is we can grow a lot. And while we get great business outcomes, we can grow and develop and stretch. And the person that came back, Doug, the person that came back from Japan was decidedly different and probably better than the one that went when you came back from Japan. So in lots of different ways, you grew and we're able to be more effective. And the same thing happens. And that's why I love the whole global dimension. I think it helps us to be better people, not just better leaders.
I would just add too, that's to me where the global innovation comes from. It's to be able to, I mentioned point A to point B, but when you can shed that mindset of, I know how to get there, that opens up all sorts of different ideas, as long as you've got and created a team that's comfortable to be able to share how they would potentially get there.
Yeah.
It's how I think the next, innovations and adjustments, both because of COVID and just where the economy is going, are going to be born from these types of global conversations from teams that are comfortable dialoguing like this.
And the data shows that it's much more likely to come if you have a global and diverse team. I mean, that's the premise for diversity. You have the business case. Well, you have the moral case, it's the right thing to do, but you have the business case. They say that if you have more diverse groups, you can have more effective business solutions, right? So that's the promise. So that's why I think this work is so important, because you have so much potential with these global teams. And how are you going to make it real?
You kind of layered into that. There's a question from another really talented lady, Ann Delos, and she's asking, can you share any insights on maintaining company culture and shared values with respect to both global teams and remote work due to the pandemic? So I read that question meaning, this is now something new and different, but we've kind of walked into this with certain culture and certain behaviors that probably need to change or certainly be altered. How does a leader address those?
I have a quick comment on it, and then I'll let the others chime in, is get them doing something. And the doing something is not going to be trying to do something fun or distracting like ukulele lessons, but get them working on real business issues and create what one of my other colleagues calls focus teams. Create teams of diverse individuals so that you can bring out their voice and have good leaders that are excellent at that and help them bring out that voice to really raise the bar, not just fix things, fix what's broken, but really raise the bar. How are we going to be more innovative? How are we going to create new markets? How are we going to, just bring our real business creativity to bear? I think that the process of working together in that way is extremely positive and useful.
Yeah, and I think what Gary said earlier about finding common purpose and redefining what that purpose is, the world's changed. So the company purpose, the team purpose probably has shifted or evolved to some degree. It's good to rework that. And one of the things that I like to focus on is doing that through stories, through business stories. And what are the stories of 2020 that your company or that your team has where they've nailed it? And maybe it's this kind of quirky, weird story about somebody helping a customer, but what's your company's 2020 story? And those are, I think, a really good place to start rebuilding those and to start sharing those across not only the team, but organizations and within your entire ecosystem.
Great thoughts. Monique, I'm guessing that you're kind of sort of aligned on that versus ukulele playing.
Certainly, I second the comments from both gentlemen. And as I mentioned in my presentation, those team conversations are really important. I don't think a leader should be the one making all the decisions. I think a leader should be a facilitator to those decisions and to the discussions that happen in the team environment. And yeah, there may be new cultures emerging from all of this, and we've got to be comfortable with change. But I think if the leader partners with the team, that can happen easier than excluding the team from those kinds of conversations. Got it.
Keep them involved. We've only got 3 minutes left. So what I would like to ask each of you is just take a minute and, for leaders out there, what are some of the things that they can be working on tomorrow and in the next week to be better leaders in this area? Monique, would you like to go first on that? Just some practical advice on something they can start right away and be a better leader.
Sure. And this is really coming from the leaders that I coach. What they are trying to do is to be more empathetic. They're trying to learn how to be more empathetic. And I coach them around starting by asking open-ended questions, by learning what those are and how to ask them. And that's something they can do immediately.
Perfect. Gary, what do you think? What's something that they can go out and do immediately tomorrow? Probably tomorrow, US time.
Yeah, they should utilize their strategy as information to create some initiatives. So whatever strategy session you did, you probably came out with 2 or 3 things that would fundamentally change your business in the next 12 to 18 months. Make sure the organization knows what those are and issue those in the form of a challenge. Say, hey, we need to dramatically improve our customer experience. Hey, we're in the market for ideas to dramatically improve the user experience. We're in the market for new ideas to dramatically improve our footprint in Latin America. Whatever it is, take your strategy and turn it into challenges so you can make some innovation conversations.
Get them thinking about what to do next.
Yep.
Perfect. Kyle, what do you think?
I think if people think about asking different questions when they're having conversations with their teammates across the globe, asking about more local challenges or adaptations that are going on. I had a client a couple of years ago, but it's still relevant today. Out of the US, he just asked his colleague in India, he said, are there any local differences that you're seeing in Bangalore right now that we should be aware of? And because nobody had asked before, nobody thought to bring that up. And this company it was a hiring platform, a jobs portal. And the guy in India said, look, tons of businesses are laying people off because of artificial intelligence. And what they're asking us to do is, can we come up with a program that helps 1,000, 10,000 people figure out what they're going to do with their careers because of this artificial intelligence AI trend? We don't do that, so we can't help them. And it was this moment where we go, yeah, we probably could. Isn't this what innovation is? Like, here's a problem in the market. we should figure out a product to be able to solve that. And so they ended up working together and coming up with this local solution. So it doesn't happen unless you proactively ask those types of open-ended questions, as Monique had said.
Well, all three of you saying the same thing. Ask questions and really listen. You know, inherent in what you've all said is listen to what's being said, listen to what's actually happening, and get past whatever's in your head, your preconceived opinions and thoughts. So critically important. One quick question, Kyle. There was a question, and if those of you out there, if you still have questions, put them in the chat or send them to info@globalchamber.org. We didn't get to all of them, but one quick question is what prompted you to do the book? What was the inspiration?
I had one client out of the US years ago who asked me to send out his marketing material across Asia. And he was this guy in Texas, and no offense to Texas, there's nothing intended, but his marketing material was all this baseball imagery. And he sent it over to me, and that to me was this moment where I go, oh my God, this is what localization is all about, because people here don't care about baseball and they don't care about your American spelling. And I told him all this, and he got really frustrated, and he said, look, just slap a dragon on it and make it Asian. And I was just taken back by how kind of like, I don't know if that's racist or what that is, but like, it was just like, how many companies have this sort of slapdragon approach where they have this surface level ability, or they think that small little change like this is going to make them somehow globally effective. And it's not just a west to east thing, it's happening on the other side as well. So that moment was like, you know what, this is happening all over the place. There's definitely a book here.
We can definitely attest to that. Great sharing time with all of you for 60 minutes. Kyle Hegarty, Monique Daigneault, and Gary Covert. You guys are amazing. You do some really outstanding work. We really appreciate you all being members of Global Chamber, and I'm sure everybody around the world who's listened in today is a little bit smarter. And if you're out there and you want some more information, you can reach out to any of them on the directory, or just reach out to any of us and send an email to info@globalchamber.org, and we'll get you connected. Two quick things about going forward. As members of Global Chamber, there's 2 or 3 different basic kinds of events that we do. One is educational, like today, where you're meeting people that are really good at their crafts that are necessary for you to be successful internationally. And so we love the opportunity to do this. Secondly, there's another kind of event that we do, and that's connecting, getting people together around new opportunities, getting to know each other. There's one of those coming up this week, a virtual League of Opportunities. Next week, we have Virtual League of Extraordinaries. We have a virtual dining event. We have a variety of things where Globies get together and connect up with each other, and I encourage you to be involved in that way as well. So thanks, everybody. Kyle, have a good rest of your day. You're just starting out. Did the kids get off to school?
It got quiet, so yeah, I hope so. Something happened, but I don't think they're here anymore.
Fantastic. Gary and Monique, thank you. Have a good evening, and we'll catch you on the other side. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks, Kyle, Monique.
Thanks, everybody, for attending.